we've got a request, if there are spaces towards the outside of the rows, you can shuffle along slightly so any latecomers can sneak in down the middle and sit. So if we kind of, if there are spaces left near the rows, we can shuffle along a bit, that would be great. A little bit of housekeeping. There are drinks and nibbles after this. They're upstairs in the Jevons room. So we basically file in through the gates and follow the signs upstairs. Probably most of you have been to one of these sessions before. We're not expecting any fire alarms. So if the fire alarm does go off, it's basically straight out through the front door, and the assembly point, I think, is actually down in front of the park on the right-hand side, but follow people in yellow jackets to follow them down. And if you need to exit, if you're staying on for drinks and nibbles and are exiting after 7 o'clock, then you'll need to find the gentleman at the back next to the door who can actually let you out of the building. Otherwise, you will get trapped in here until about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So, but it's very easy. There's plenty of people around to let you out. So just before I introduce Adam, I'd like to thank you all for coming along this evening, but I would like to very briefly introduce the Social Science Research Group. We have a group here in the Energy Institute particularly focusing on social science issues. And Mike, would you like to say just a little bit about the group?
Sure. So yeah, the UCL Social Science Group was set up last year. It's a group of UCL students and staff who are interested in people in energy use. We have a mailing list for sharing information on events, training, asking each other questions, that sort of thing. We have a regular reading group, and we put on events. So, for example, we're going to visit DECC on Monday and hold a seminar there with some colleagues and talk to them. So it's basically just a quick plug. So anyone from UCL who's interested in finding out more or joining, come and call me afterwards, or Faye and Carrie sat at the front there. We administrate the group. Or obviously anyone who's not at UCL but perhaps wants to engage with us, we'd also be really keen to speak to you. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much. Right, so the format for this evening's talk is Adam will talk for around about 50-45 minutes, and then we'll have sort of 15-20 minutes of questions at the end. Adam is head of social science engagement at DECC and has worked in a range of social science positions throughout government for a reasonable number of years now. He has a PhD in the sort of cognitive neuropsychology end of things, so he comes out of an academic tradition, so he's probably a kind of an academic sympathiser at heart at some level. But he is the kind of friendly face of social science research in DECC, and one of his roles is to engage with us, and he's very approachable, and so there is opportunities to talk to him afterwards and find out what he's doing.
Thanks very much, David, and I'd like to thank Mike particularly. This whole session kind of grew out of a little conversation we had at the colloquium in November last year, wasn't it? And it's just a really great opportunity for me to come along to the Energy Institute. I always love coming here. It's great. The seminars are really great because you have the best nibbles of any seminar session. One of the things that was a pleasant surprise, actually. I mean, just looking at the numbers of people here. I mean, when the seminar was announced and my name was catapulted into the Twitter sphere, it was an interesting experience. I found out, because I obviously wanted the colleagues to come along, that tickets sold out in 9 minutes. I mean, what is that? You know, there must be some sort of mistake here. Maybe you know, there's an Adam Cooper in One Direction. I must be way blue. I don't want to see that. I'm going to cut that out of YouTube for a start. Yeah, that would go on the internet version of this slide. But so it's so great to see people, so many people here, to look at, if you like, what I call democratic science. It's the science of the people, for the people, by the people, kind of thing. And you know, social science is, I think, an incredibly important part of energy at DECC. So what I wanted to do first of all, actually, is a little bit of social science. Okay, so don't be scared. I just want anybody who thinks of themselves as a social scientist or a social researcher in some way, if you just put your hands up. Okay. I'm not going to go and check if you're a member of the BSA or anything like that, don't worry. That's really, really good. I think I estimate about 50-50 there, you know, and that's me as a social scientist, we do quant as well as qual. So it's a really good mix there, and I'm really pleased to see such a sort of balance of people. Okay. So what am I going to talk about first? I just want to start off with DECC policies, okay? This is going to be a little bit kind of, you know, 101 basic kind of stuff. You probably already know this, but I figured it was kind of useful just to sort of set the ground. So the important thing is, you know, think about climate change. You know, DECC sees climate change as a man-made thing, right? So it's not woman-made, it's man-made. It's interesting. And it's man-made climate change, anthropogenic. It's about people who've done something. What have they done? Well, they've taken some stuff out of the ground and they've done something to it, and that stuff has then allowed them to do something else. And because they've done that other stuff goes in the atmosphere. That's my technical description of what's happening. And so, of course, you know, DECC very much sees climate change as a sort of as a human, as a social, as a man-made kind of issue, and likewise energy policy. It's its energy is constructed socially is the point. So you know, its energy is transformed by people, it's governed by people, and the reasons that we use energy are driven through the sort of institutions and the daily practices and routines. And this is very much, I'm sure you'll recognise this description of how DECC sort of sees energy policy and its starting point for energy policy. It's the way in which our day-to-day routines construct the practices and use services like getting comfort in and draw on energy, and then that causes a range of problems, including climate change. So just for example, there's the Green Deal. Okay, the Green Deal is this policy where you know, we're trying to generate institutions where people can make agreements with each other, sort of saying, you know, if I'm a business, I'm going to change the way I do my things so that I'm more energy efficient if you'll continue to come with me. Or if with a local authority, you know, we're going to rearrange the way in which we deliver services to you so they're more energy efficient. We want to make sure that you're happy. You're making deals, green deals with them. So it's about the institutional framework that we're creating in order to enable a reconstruction of practices. Because the point is about, you know, if energy is socially constructed, you need to socially reconstruct it in order to make changes, right? I mean, it's kind of self-evident, I suppose. Really. I don't really need to labour the points. So, you know, with Green Deal, you know, we need to sort of create new institutions, and one of those is smart meters, and here you can see a smart meter. This is the idea of a sort of public symbol, a sort of social symbol of energy, where communities can gather around and understand patterns and dynamics of energy as it's socially constructed through their daily practices and the institutions that construct those practices. And so as part of our range of policies to enable the reconstruction of social institutions, of daily practices in order to reconstitute the way energy is used. And you start to see new kinds of things happening. So, you know, currently, you know, typically people will eat at home individually, you know, quite energy intensive, and you start to see a shift towards, you know, the changing patterns and practices around consumption in restaurants, say. So having more people together into one place is a better way of managing energy, and it's more social, it's a more human way of doing it. And of course, we happen to have an engineer in our department, and he sort of says that, you know, if we insulate this, it'll be even more efficient. Now, I mean, that's fair enough. He's an engineer. You know, I can sort of, you know, talk this fairly believably sound. And as you all wake up, nice and refreshed, you find out a little trip into an alternative parallel world is not the current world that we're living in. That was a little demonstration of kind of how a kind of contrast with the way in which DECC policies really are. So just to be clear, particularly for those on YouTube who are probably going to take that previous section out of context and paste it into somewhere else, so we're all very meta here, very self-aware of the modern technology. The Green Deal is actually a sort of finance mechanism for enabling households and businesses to invest in materials to improve their energy efficiency. A smart meter is a piece of technology put in someone's house or building in order to be able to monitor their energy use on a much more frequent basis and to transmit that wirelessly. And we also have, of course, major policies around promoting the investment in large-scale infrastructure like nuclear power stations, wind turbines, particularly out at sea, and of course we have a real strong focus on things like climate change negotiation. So I wasn't sure how kind of confused you were going to get with my sociological explanation at first, but one of the points of doing that was to give those of you who didn't put your hands up before a bit of a sense of how it felt for me as a social scientist going into DECC 18 months ago to be confronted with a sort of implacable sort of technological analysis of the issues. It's, you sort of get into DECC and it's like, well, yeah, of course you need, energy is a technical issue and you need a technical solution, and here's technical solution, you just got to put it in here, and then you find out the heat pump doesn't quite work to what you thought, and why is that? And so the whole issue of the way in which the policy is developed is very much on a sort of technically oriented sort of slant. What I'm not saying specifically is that the sociological one is better, it's just different in a way, it's almost the kind of exact opposite. And so, I didn't want to be preaching to the converted here, and it's quite good that there's such a mix of people here. But if I was to be preaching, I'd be preaching at the church of multidisciplinarity. Okay, so this is about a sort of properly integrated analysis, a proper sort of bringing together of the different disciplines. Not just a sort of, like a rugby ball of individual disciplines passing on their analysis onto the next, but a properly integrated one. And I'll come to a bit deeper expression of what I mean by that shortly. So that's, so the point, I just wanted to make that point clear, really clear. So if now you want to either fall asleep, you can do that, you've got the main point of it, or if you are bitterly disappointed that I'm not in one direction, you can leave now. So that's the main thrust. So next section of the talk, I'm just going to talk a bit more broadly about social research, social science in DECC and in governments more broadly. But first, a couple of disclaimers, which are quite classic for a sort of civil servant talking to the public. So nothing I say is a statement of policy. I want to make that clear, particularly for you watching on YouTube. And in fact, I can't really say anything interesting about policy at all because this is kind of public event. I'm going to present some analysis. Okay, so here's a really big sort of health warning. It's illustrative. That's not to say it's made up. It's not to say that it's wrong. It's illustrative. It's something I had to do this talk. I had to write this talk in a space of a day or something like that. So I pulled together some analysis just to sort of illustrate how social science could play into policy analysis in a different way to the way that it currently is gone. So what you see is not official, it's not DECC statistics, it's just some things to get the things going. Now, I've probably made some mistakes and those are intentional, even if I didn't know that. And the point we'll be making around the limits of me as an individual social scientist being able to know the issues that we touch upon in terms of the technical information. And finally, of course, you'll probably not be surprised to say that, although it might infer that there's a need to have a massive research program, there's no commitment to spend loads of money on research from DECC, at least. So I just want to get that clear. I know that's going to be edited out of YouTube, what I am here for, let's get on to the positives. I'm going to talk about government social research. So here's another little poll. Who in the room has heard of the Government Social Research Service? Put your hands up. Okay, well, that's probably about 10%. That's good on the one hand. It means that I'm actually reaching out and I'm going to enlighten you more to the facts of the government social research. It's kind of bad in the fact that more of you don't know about it already, so I have to take that back to them and tell them more about that. But you'll hear about that. I'm going to talk about social research and social science in DECC, of course. That's kind of what we're here for. And we're going to explore social science questions in energy and climate change. So it shouldn't be a surprise. Would be if it was culture or geography or something. Identify some challenges and opportunities. It's always good to end on some opportunities, nice kind of fields. So hopefully that's a reasonable agenda. So government social research. You probably all know that government has economists, I imagine. And we also know that government has statistics, statisticians rather. But we also have social researchers. And these disciplines, these analytical disciplines, are organised into professional groupings. So the Government Social Research Service is one such professional grouping where in order to be a government social researcher, you're employed into a post which is a designated social research post. I am in a designated social research post. I am a card-carrying member of the Government Social Research Service. and it's a professional service. So to get it, you have to have a degree in one of the many different types of social sciences. The main thrust of the role is it's a kind of consultancy role. So we help policy officials to understand the nature of their problem, to commission research, design the studies, bring to bear a huge range of social research methods in the design of those studies, help to interpret and understand a wider range of social research kind of questions. For those of you who have an interest in working in government and maybe fancy being a member of the Government Social Research Service, the only external entry route at the moment is through the fast stream service, which you can see will be opening in September in 2013. That's your only external route besides other kinds of secondments and things, which we're also happy to try and organise. And every now and again, much less common at the moment, as you might imagine, is external advertising of posts. The government, there's about 1,000 government social researchers across government. I can't remember off the top of my head how that compares with the other disciplines, but just to sort of name the disciplines, there's the Government Economics Service, the Government Statistical Service, the Government Operational Research Service, who do a lot of the sophisticated modelling, the Government Science and Engineering, who are sort of a collection of the scientists, like climate scientists and engineers. We have quite a lot of those in DECC. There's customer insight specialists as well, and we have quite a strong team in DECC on that side as well. So that's the sort of the shape of government social research and how it sort of sits in context with other analytical disciplines. So hopefully that's a useful bit of context. Now to DECC. Okay, here I have ripped open the heart of the department so you can look inside at its innards. And what you see is the head at the top, which is the permanent secretary, and that's the permanent version of the Secretary of State, if you like, the civil servant who heads up the department. And on the right lung is the International Climate Change and Energy Efficiency, which internally is known as ICE. And on this side is the Energy Markets and Infrastructure, EMI. And roughly speaking, it's kind of demand and supply. You might sort of see it like that, but it's not, obviously not quite that. Down here we have the Chief Operating Officer with some really important stuff around nuclear decommissioning and nuclear security, really important stuff, as well as the sort of general kind of corporate services like HR and finance. And then over on the far corner there we have a sort of strategy team. We have the Chief Economist, where all the strategic analysis goes on, and the Chief Scientific Advisor, David Mackay, and his Science and Innovation team. So what about the social research? Where does that fit into this overall thing? Well, we've got a bunch of them in the customer insight team, so there's a sort of centralised collection of individuals who sit under Liz Owen, who heads up the customer insight team, under the Energy Efficiency Deployment Office. So it's kind of customer insight because of things like Green Deal, smart meters, these kind of policies where there are interface with somebody who's going to be consuming some kind of product like in the Green Deal, and so having that kind of expertise there is really essential. In practice, there's sort of they have a whole range of mixture of disciplines within there, in this sort of social and customer insight side of things. Then there are, I think, 4. I'm looking at Ali at the back there. Is that right? 4 in heat and industry. Ali is one of them on that side. Then there's, I think, 3 posts in the Green Deal, mostly targeted around evaluation, of course, because the Green Deal is now launched. So it's looking at how we understand its effectiveness. Smart meters has got, I think, 2 specialists, although there's a fair number of people who kind of sit on the boundaries who don't have official posts but do a lot of social research type of work. There's a couple under the Chief Economist who head up evaluation, so evaluation, the approach to evaluation. Also our head profession for social research sits there, Siobhan Campbell. We've got an evaluation specialist on the International Climate Fund in the International Climate Change section. And then there's me. And I sit down here amongst all the engineers and scientists under Chief Scientific Advisor. Now you're kind of thinking, well, heck, they're all over that side, what about this side? And that's kind of because, I raised the diagram a bit, but I mean, in practice, what you see is that there are some emissaries that shoot around and help out some of the social science issues over here on the big energy infrastructure. So we've got work going on, for instance, around communities and big energy infrastructure, and looking to develop that side of things. But it's the history of this. I mean, the scale of the social research capacity within DECC tells a story in its own right. I mean, I joined 18 months ago. It only really started with Liz Owen as one of the first sort of social research professionals in the department, joined only sort of 2 years before I did. So we've gone from sort of 1 to nearly 20 in the space of 3 years. We're really pleased that there's a clear internal recognition of the need for this kind of expertise in the department. So I think that's all I need to say about that. We also work with DEFRA on hosting a social science expert panel. So I thought it might be useful for you to know who's on that. We've got Andy Goulson, who's from Leeds. We've got Patrick Devine-Wright from Exeter. Harriet Bulkley from Durham. Nick Pigeon from Cardiff. Simon Davoudi from Newcastle. Julie Barnett from, this is going to test my memory now, I think it's Bath. Jim Watson, who is Sussex, but also now the head of research at UCL, the UK Energy Research Centre. Patricia Broadfoot from, I think, Birmingham. Liz Dowler from Warwick. Nigel Gibson from Surrey. And Judith Petts from Southampton, Jeremy Phillipson from Reading Project, which is based up in Newcastle, it's an environment-based thing, and Sarah Watmore at Oxford. So you see a sort of, probably won't know all of those, are a range of sort of environmental ones and some more energy-focused ones, but they cover a range of different disciplines, including things like looking at communities, Patrick Devine-Wright, governance and practices, Harriet Bulkley looks at risk communication, communicating climate change, that Nick Pigeon, social and legal issues. I'm not going to go around the whole thing, don't worry. They kind of do a lot of stuff around influence, both internal in the department, but also externally across the wider community. Quality assurance of work, so we've had Andy and Harriet look at non-domestic energy efficiency review to sort of QA that. They offer advice on particular issues and research, and obviously clear expertise in particular areas, and also help to build our network. So we're really pleased with this. We're the only ministerial government department to have a social science expert panel. The FSA, the Food Standards Authority, has a social science panel, but it's not ministerial, so I can say that, but we're really pleased with the way this is working out. We have a link in with our science advisory group, which is more of a sort of technical science advice group for the chief scientist, Julie Pigeon. And it's just a really good interface with the academic community. It's working really well. So that's the social science expert panel. I just wanted to talk about a little bit of distinction, I suppose, between social research and social science. I can't hear you mention the two things side by side. So typically, social research is the doing of it and the methods and the design of studies, and the social researchers are kind of mostly equipped on that side. Of course, we also have knowledge, but we tend to bring in the social science expertise, the knowledge, the topic expertise from things like the panel. And obviously we're trying to get a lot more interchange and build up our internal knowledge. Not least because, I suppose, and many of you will know, and the fact of the sort of social science group at UCL, social science and energy is an emerging field. It's been emerging for quite a long time, but it's needing to sort of build capacity in this area, particularly around the knowledge in that space. So I just wanted to sort of make that distinction in case anyone was confused. Okay, what I want to do now is just is talk about heat. So this is a little kind of a case study. It's about how social research in DECC has worked with policy. And this is a kind of a cartoon version of it, but I think that the broad truths of it kind of hold, and I've discussed this with a few people internally just to make sure I've not just completely made it up, but this is broadly kind of how it works. So heat. We have a strong policy on heat. As you see, you've got 4 social researchers working in that area, as well as a range of other disciplines. It's a really good multidisciplinary team. But heat is a major kind of issue, and sort of, why is it a major issue is the first thing. Let's look at sort of the logic of the analysis that's followed through to bring us to looking at and focusing on heat. So many of you may have seen this diagram. I love this diagram, I think it's ace. This is a Sankey diagram. I didn't know that before 18 months ago, so I'm certainly learning things every day. So basically it's an energy flow diagram. So if I wander over here, you've got all your kind of your coal and your gas, all your kind of inputs over here, and then they kind of shimmy through this system, and they come out over here as things like transport, going out in domestic places, other industrial places, and so this is where it's being used, okay? So you sort of, and the thickness of the line represents the million tons of oil equivalent. Don't ask me about these units, but you can shorten that to MTO, apparently. So I'm going to say these are MTOs in here. It doesn't really matter what they are, but they're all relatively appropriate. So the thicker the MTO, the thicker the line, the bigger the M tail, and therefore the more energy that's being used in that part of the system. So if you're thinking now, okay, where am I going to focus? I've got to focus on my policies, where am I going to do it? Okay, so the thickest one. The thickest one is, it's this big thing here. What's that? Where's that? It goes to transport. Okay, we're DECC. That's DFT. We'll leave that to them. That's how it works. Where's the next one? Okay, go through here and go to the big purple one. That looks pretty good. And most of it ends up over here, which is in domestic settings. So gas is one of the biggest energy uses in the sort of overall scheme of things. It's where a lot of the energy outside of transport. I won't talk about sort of wasted sort of energy. That's a whole separate thing. But in terms of domestic settings, gas is a big use. So it's not, what do we use gas for? We don't just pump it into people's homes. If we did that, the population would probably decline quite rapidly. We burn it. We burn it for what reason? To make heat. Of course, we also do a bit of cooking and make some hot water at the same time. But pretty much, gas is used for heat. So okay, that's the biggest use. What's been happening with gas over the years? So this is DECC statistics that I've pulled into a graph. And broadly speaking, what you see from 1990, this trend goes right back to the sort of 70s. I mean, you guys know this much better than me, really. It's been rising, sort of, this is non-temperature corrected, I should say, as well. Hence you see the huge peak here and the big drop-offs here, the sort of really warm, really cold years in 2010, 2011. Oh, the other way around. You see this big rise up to 2005, so I promise that's a bit of a problem, but then it's starting to decline, except it gets a big jump when it gets really cold, of course. And that's pretty impressive, isn't it? So, what the heck caused that? Oh, it's the old condensing gas boiler to the rescue. It's the condensing combi boiler, I think, which was mandated in 2005, and it appears to, of course, this quite sort of fairly dramatic reduction in energy use. I mean, of course, we've seen energy reductions from other kinds of installations. Cavity wall, loft insulation, double glazing has kind of shifted the angle of this overall curve down. But it's the introduction of this super efficient, 90% efficient types of boilers. It seems to have brought it down, which is pretty impressive from any kind of perspective, I think. But of course, the problem is it still uses gas. And gas is a fossil fuel, and if you keep burning fossil fuels, you're going to keep forcing the climate. And if you keep forcing the climate, you've got some big problems. So, the question is, how do you decarbonise heat? Well, so engineers think about it and they go, we need this, I think. I googled heat pump, and this is what I found. So this is a picture of a, I think it's an air source heat pump, but again, I might be wrong, and again, self-aware limitations of my knowledge, but this is a heat pump. So heat pumps, supremely efficient ways of translating heat using a bit of electricity from the ground or the air into a room. So great, we've got this fantastic solutions for decarbonising heat, because electricity can be quite easily decarbonised from renewables or nuclear. So if we can power those through renewables, we're on to a winner, right? That's great. Okay. So then the engineers are going, well, okay, we've got to put 26 million of these into different homes. How are we going to do that? So we're not going to give it away. So we better go and ask the economists about how we can do that. So the economists come along and go, well, these are quite pricey things, and I'm not sure the consumers are going to sort of see the benefits of these different features of these technologies. So we need to find out whether or not people are willing to pay for different features of this technology. So the economists then turn to the social researcher and say, can you help us do a study with some people to find out what they're willing to pay? And so then come back with a study that shows X amount of money for certain types of features. And so this is the sort of the kind of the parable, or the kind of caricature of how the different disciplines are interacting. And in a way, the kind of the area of each of these different images represents the input the different types of disciplines have put into this analysis. So mostly kind of heat pump, a big chunk of kind of money, and then the people are kind of a thumb and a bit of a finger stuck onto the money. And it's kind of, well, the point is that each individual stage is executed brilliantly by some of the really great social researchers, particularly. And each stage, economists, the technical people have done a brilliant job. But is that all there is to it? So technical people say, well, you're social scientists, what have you got to offer? So that's a good question. Let me see. What would a social scientist say? What is heat for? That's the first question. Why do we bother with heat? Well, we get cold. So if we get cold, we want to get warm, and we typically want to get warm in our homes. So there's obviously something important about homes and people. So we ought to look at what's the relationship between homes and people in sort of heat use, and given that heat is mostly driven through gas, gas consumption, for instance, by number of people per home. So here I put together, and this is my illustrative analysis, which I heavily caveat, which is kind of provoking discussion, but I kind of put quotes around the social for a certain reason. We'll see that at the end. So here's some sort of social factors that could be driving energy for heat, question mark. So the first one is this interesting graph here, which is interesting for two reasons. One, because of what it shows, and two, because it's kind of fuzzy and a little bit sort of worn and ragged around the ears. So what this graph shows, which you may or may not be able to see, is the numbers of people in a household, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the two lines, the front are the total gas and electricity consumption. So these are the dark blue and the dark purple. And you see the total gas and electricity consumption change. Sorry, no, that's wrong. This is so these two, the blue and the yellow, are the electricity and gas total. This is per capita for each one. So of course, as you get to bigger households, your energy use goes up, but it's not additional, right? I mean, this may not be particularly telling, but the point is that if you take two one-person households, they're going to be up here, but a 1, 2-person household is only up here, right? So there's something in the order of a significant sort of energy saving in terms of the household structure and the way in which heat is consumed. So that thing strikes me as a pretty important thing. The fact that this document is, this image is so wobbly is because I drew it out of a document from the ECI, the Environmental Change Institute, who did this report in 2000 and used data from the English Housing Condition Survey. For the English Housing Survey geeks amongst you, you'll know that means it's quite old. And this data is actually from 1995. Okay, and I brought it out because I thought that was quite useful. And I went on to my colleagues in DECC and I said, so you must have something more up to date than this. I said, well, we do, but it's not available until sort of took about a month's time because they've just done another study which gives you this data more recently. And that tells you one thing, which I'll return to at the end. So this is the most recent data of household size by gas and energy consumption, I think, and I'd be willing to, if you've got any others, a nationally representative sample. So that's one kind of driver. Why might that be a driver? Well, let's look at how household sizes and numbers of dwellings have changed over time. So this is national statistics data. I think some DCLG data published a few years ago. All the references are on here when you download it. But basically, households size has been dropping since the 70s. So we've been getting smaller and smaller households, we've been getting more and more dwellings. So more and more individuals, particularly, as a strong driver is more individual households, not just going from 3 to 2, but going down from 2 to 1. And that's set to increase, so projections are take it down to 2.1 on average by 2031, whilst the number of dwellings going up, of course. So, you know, if you combine that creates potentially quite a strong driver for increased heat consumption if you're going instead of 2 people per household to 2 one-person households. Okay, that's my one punt there. The next punt is on demographic change. So by 2035, so we'll be not only kind of older, but quite a bit more female overall. Now the older people tend to feel the cold more, need more heat in order to feel comfortable. And there's also some evidence, there's a literature review from the US, which shows that women tend to feel colder sooner than men do. So if women are feeling, if there's more women and they're older, there's an implicit sort of demand increase for more energy, for heat. So that's another one, another punt. A third one is our sedentary lifestyles. We're increasing or we're decreasing the amount of activity we're doing in our homes. Now, we published some data from there's like 2 diary studies that the ONS does, the Office of National Statistics. And they did one in 2000, one in 2005, and they showed the amount of minutes resting. And the amount of minutes resting has increased by something like 145% over those 5 years. So people are just sitting down more, and what they're doing, not just sitting down, but they're consuming energy whilst they're sitting down, through the TV, through the games consoles, their mobile phones and all the rest of it. So it's a bit of a double whammy. So So these sedentary lifestyles, when we're sat down, we're not moving around, we feel colder, we need to have the ambient temperature higher. So that's another driver. Another one is this thing. Yeah, I got one of these just a few months ago, a new boiler, and they gave me a fancy new, brand new heating control for my boiler. And I literally can't work out how to use it. I don't see myself as being particularly technically illiterate, but the design features on these kind of things are almost designed to sort of put ordinary people off from trying to control their heat in exactly the way that light switches don't put people off trying to control the light. So it's, when one thinks about the way in which controls for systems operate, it's people will, I suspect, tend to, and we see this from some of the qualitative research, not touch it. It'll be left on default settings, it'll be left on rather than off, because of course we don't know how something's going to work. You'd rather leave it to be warm than to let it go cold. All of these kind of default settings that heuristics people will use in trying to navigate these kind of systems. And then a final one is a lack of awareness of energy for heat. So Matt Lipson, who works in DECC, really great friend of mine, did a cracking study, a sort of ethnographic qualitative study, looking at different homeowners who have very high, very low levels of energy use. And one of the things that came out of that qualitative stuff was how people, when they talk about energy, they're using energy to mean electricity, not heat. And of course, people don't really know that there are the balance of energy use for the two things. So there's some sort of, I think there's a statistic in the report, and again I think it's linked from this in the notes when you download it, which means that if you were to reduce the amount of your temperature in your home for a year by 1 degree, then it's the equivalent of living in complete darkness in terms of the amount of energy. But of course, the difference in terms of the energy service provided is quite dramatic. So 1 degree less, well, it might be a bit chilly every now and again. Complete darkness, can't really do much at night. So it's people don't understand that distinction, don't understand the balance between it, and if you don't know that, how are you going to do anything about it? So that's my little trip through some potential areas for sort of the social factors, and I called them kind of social in kind of inverted commas, because of course they're not just social. This is kind of comes back to this multidisciplinary point. The heating control is a technical device. The social nature of it comes when it's put into a social setting, and people have to interact with it and understand it. People's homes are technical and material objects which they interact with and they live in. So you can't just have a sort of social understanding of it. It has to be, and by definition, to be sensible, a technical definition as well, technical understanding. It has to be kind of woven together, not just sort of two parallel streams of understanding. And this sort of issue struck me as pretty critical as I worked my way through DECC and started to understand, well, why is it that the social sciences haven't had such an impact in energy policy until now? And it's become quite clear to me that this issue of not only a fully integrated analysis between the social and the technical is not only essential for any kind of sensible understanding, but we're hamstrung because actually most of the data and the research out there is mostly kind of technical. So when we, I've gone ahead of myself. So just to step back, sorry about that. Call out the slide, it's quite a good one. Why is it important then that these things, these social factors are important if it's going down? Well, here's the graph again of the rising gas use that falls off at 2005. If there are these background factors that are driving us up to 2031, there's a danger of us going back up. And because there's only so much that the technical interventions can do before an underlying trend, if there is such a thing, pushes us back in the wrong direction, and that's exactly what we don't want to happen. We'd quite happily if we could keep putting out condenser boilers. That's going to help us reach it. You just follow this trend through. I did it. They're dragged out in Excel. That's how good my analysis is. And you find that it hits zero gas consumption at around 2041 or something. It's true. Isn't it? Pretty sophisticated stuff. But the point is, point isn't that. So I'm going to regret that on YouTube. The point is that, that if there's this underlying trend, we need to do something about it. And the point is we can't do anything about it. We don't really know what are these wider factors, and that's where the sort of data comes in. So there's a strong uncertainty about the future. And if these social factors are as important as I potentially make out, then we really need to get to grips with them and understand what the consequences are. So, this is a bit like I started saying, I'm going to start saying it again. What are the challenges and opportunities then for social sciences? Well, data is a key one. Data, I'm going to say it, we have no data, which seems a bit odd because we have loads of data, masses of data. We have lots of data in DECC, which is the digest of UCL-Energy statistics, and most of you will know that's kind of technical data about stuff. It's not really about the people. We're starting to see emerging data sets coming through from different kind of studies, but there's no consistent long-term trend data that takes both a social and a technical kind of approach. And as we've seen, things like household size could be quite critical. Now, just to sort of help you understand the complexity of household, because it sounds quite simple, but it turns out that in social sciences, household doesn't mean the number of people per building. It means you could have 4 people living independently in one building, and that would be 4 households. Okay, so that would be 4 households in social sciences. In fact, what we care about in energy analysis is that 4 people are living in one contained space. So you start to see some of these issues coming out, and we need to sort of get to grips with it. We need to be able to create from that new data new kinds of metrics to describe some of these things. We're not talking about MTOs anymore. We've got to talk about something else that's got both the technical and the social woven together, whether that's including things just per person is quite a good start, but also about maybe the energy services, the well-being, the standard of living. I don't know what it might be. That's not my job. It's your job to sort of try and work that out. And of course, I'm hopefully speaking to receptive ears here as the host of the big data centre that UCL is lead on as an end-use energy demand centre. So data and metrics will be a key part, I suspect, of UCL's future. But of course, in order to get that data, we actually need new methods, it strikes me. It's no good as you look at the methods on this. I know I keep going on about this, it's going to get boring. You take the English housing survey, you take the, any sort of analysis that's been done. I was just at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation this afternoon, and they were talking about, equity distributional effects in consumption, right? So these are climate change policies and how they can be fair. In order to do an analysis of whether energy policy is fair, you have to patch together about 4 surveys, like the English housing survey, the resources survey, the travel surveys, all these kind of different things in order to get to something which we don't have. But even when you do that, you take the English housing survey, for those social scientists in you, it doesn't sample really appropriately. It samples on the household stock, on the housing stock rather than on the household, or in terms of the energy system. So it doesn't take into account the fact that some people have electric, some people have gas, some people are off gas grid, and all these kind of things. So the methods and how we set up a questionnaire. The great thing about being here is seeing the doctoral training centre PhDs going out there, doing these kind of studies, finding out what works, what doesn't work, what's valid, what's not valid, try and develop these new field methods to lay the groundwork for new kinds of approach. And then once you've got that data, then there's a big question of what the hell do you do with it? So, we've got studies like the English Housing Survey Energy Follow-up Study, which you may or may not know about, which looks at, there's some social data in there, not a great deal, but it's kind of parallel data to the technical data, which is lots of measurements and things. We also have the Housing Energy Survey, which is about electricity, and that's got data, things like every 5 minutes of a kettle's energy load for a year. Right? Can you imagine? I don't know how many 5 minutes there are in a year, that's a lot. What do you do with that data? How do you average it? How do you combine it with questions about people drinking tea or having friends around it? How do you make sense of these sort of things? These are the kind of questions that this is the sort of the atomic level of the social and technical science and the analysis methods that we need to be developed to reflect that. So I've been thinking that maybe we need a new discipline. I don't know. Maybe we don't. Maybe I'm over-egging it. But if we did, here's my punt, applied physical sociology. which takes into account the fact that, you know, sociology talks about materials, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about people who know about sort of the physical properties of material, the physical capacities of different technologies, but also can combine that directly with the theoretical and methodological issues that sociology more broadly brings to bear on these things. So that's my kind of little punt. Maybe there's going to be a professor of applied physical sociology in UCL in a few years' time, who knows, or maybe not, but either way, it's about multidisciplinarity, it's about an integrated multidisciplinarity that I'm really keen to see, and I know is emerging with things like the Doctoral Training Centre, with the way in which UCL-Energy Institute works. It's a you know, cutting-edge kind of institution, and it's an institution that can drive forward this kind of agenda. So I want to thank you very much for listening to me. Here's my contact details. As I say, I'm head of social science engagement, so I'm trying to outreach and engage. You can even give me a ring if you fancy a chat. I may not be at my desk. I'm on LinkedIn, so by all means, you know, try and link into me if you're on that. It's a great way of maintaining a network. So thanks very much for listening to me. I hope it's been interesting. I hope it's been stimulating. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Right, I'm going to field questions, and I'll try to take them in order, and Michelle's hand was the first to go up.
I don't mind. I'm sure you've given me some of these stats before, but would you mind reiterating, sort of comparing the number of social scientists that there are in DECC, the number of economists and statisticians, and also what that sort of spread is like in other government departments that you've worked in?
Sure, yes. So in DECC, we have 90 economists in a department of about 1,400 staff in total. I think there's a big chunk of them up in Aberdeen. There are 20 social researchers, as you've seen. There's about 40 statisticians I'm aware of. There's about 12 or so operational researchers. There are in the region of, I think, about 30 to 40 engineers and climate scientists. It's hard to count because